General Hospital will reveal Valentin never anticipated that his carefully orchestrated assassination attempt on Carly would backfire so quickly and disastrously. The moment Brennan discovered the poison champagne, his fury ignited like an uncontrollable inferno, seething with a mix of betrayal and rage. It was not just an offense to his intelligence, it was a declaration of war. For a man like Brennan, whose ruthlessness knew no bounds, such an affront could not go unanswered. Without hesitation, he set into motion a brutal counterattack, one that would send a clear message: Valentin had made a fatal mistake. As the shadows of deception and violence loomed over him, Valentin realized he had walked straight into a perilous trap. Brennan was no ordinary adversary. He wielded both power and merciless precision, making him capable of erasing Valentin from existence with the flick of a wrist. The weight of impending doom pressed upon him, leaving him little room to maneuver. Every move he considered carried the risk of sealing his own fate. He needed a way out, a strategy to neutralize Brennan before he found himself buried beneath the wreckage of his own failed plot. But before Valentin could fully grasp the gravity of his predicament, an even more alarming threat emerged: Charlotte. His daughter had been watching from the shadows, absorbing every twist and turn of the unfolding battle. Unlike her father, she harbored no hesitation, no uncertainty. With the kind of quiet determination that made her all the more dangerous, she resolved to finish what Valentin had started. Carly had to pay. Not just for Valentin's sake, but for her own. This was no longer about mere vengeance. For Charlotte, it was a matter of family honor, and she would not allow her father's failure to dictate the final outcome. Unbeknownst to Valentin, his own blood had become the wild card in this dangerous game. While he sought to outmaneuver Brennan, Charlotte had already set her sights on Carly with a chilling clarity of purpose. She did not need permission. She did not need validation. She only needed the opportunity to strike, and when the moment came, she would not hesitate. Charlotte was no longer the innocent girl she once was. The scars of the past, the weight of loss, and her unwavering loyalty to Valentin had forged her into a sharpened blade, poised to strike at any enemy that dared to threaten her family. There was no room for fear, no hesitation in her heart, only a burning rage that simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt. When she learned of Valentin's failure and the relentless pursuit by Brennan, she did not cower or tremble. Instead, an icy determination settled over her, steeling her resolve. She would not stand idly by while her father was hunted like prey. If Valentin had miscalculated, if he had stumbled in the deadly game of power and survival, then she would be the one to correct his mistake. The shadows became her allies as she moved with calculated precision, slipping through the cracks of the chaos that Valentin had unknowingly unleashed. Every lesson he had ever taught her, every instinct he had honed in her, now guided her steps. She understood that Brennan was a force to be reckoned with, a predator who thrived on control and intimidation. But Charlotte had something that he did not anticipate, a mind sharpened by vengeance and a heart that had long abandoned the constraints of innocence. She had watched, learned, and evolved, shedding any remnants of the naive child she had once been. With cold determination, she set her sights on Carly. The woman had survived Valentin's attempt on her life, but she would not escape Charlotte's. This was not just about revenge, it was about proving herself, about ensuring that no one dared to challenge her father again. Brennan may have declared war on Valentin, but he had underestimated the force that lurked in the shadows. Charlotte was ready to strike, and when she did, there would be no room for error. No second chances. Carly's fate had been sealed the moment she survived the poisoned champagne. Now, it was only a matter of time before Charlotte delivered the final blow. Unlike Valentin, Charlotte was methodical, patient, and left no trace of her movements. She understood that recklessness led to failure, and she refused to make the same mistakes her father had. Instead of launching a direct attack, she took her time, carefully weaving herself into the fabric of Carly's life like an invisible thread. It began subtly, small, untraceable disturbances that disrupted Carly's sense of security. The misplaced objects, the eerie feeling of being watched, the unsettling noises in the dead of night, all designed to unsettle, to make Carly question her own instincts. Charlotte's presence was never overt, never tangible enough for Carly to grasp, yet it lingered like a ghost just out of reach. She became a shadow in Carly's periphery, an unseen force that kept her in a perpetual state of unease. Every time Carly turned a corner, every time she looked over her shoulder, there was an inexplicable sense of someone, lurking just beyond her line of sight. The paranoia seeped into Carly's bones, gnawing at her confidence, leaving her jumpy and exhausted. That was exactly what Charlotte wanted. But psychological warfare alone was not enough. Charlotte was prepared to go further, to push Carly to the very brink before delivering the final, crushing blow. The night she decided to escalate her game was carefully chosen. The streets outside were silent, the wind barely stirring the curtains as she moved undetected through the darkness. The locks posed no challenge, she had studied them, understood their weaknesses, and slipped inside with practiced ease. The house was quiet, save for the steady rhythm of Carly's breathing coming from the bedroom. Charlotte advanced slowly, deliberately, her heart steady with the knowledge that she was in complete control. She didn't need to wake Carly. She didn't need to strike yet. This moment wasn't about violence, it was about power. Standing at the foot of the bed, she watched her enemy in the most vulnerable state possible, her gaze dark with the weight of unspoken rage. The hatred that simmered within her was absolute, but there was something almost intoxicating about the silence, the knowledge that Carly was utterly unaware of the danger lingering just inches away. She let the moment stretch, savoring it, allowing herself to drink in the sight of Carly lying there, oblivious to the predator in her midst. Then, with the same ghost-like precision, Charlotte withdrew, slipping back into the night as if she had never been there at all. By the time Carly stirred, sensing the faintest shift in the air, there was nothing left but an empty room and a lingering unease that would haunt her long after Charlotte had gone. This was just the beginning. Carly was already losing sleep, already feeling the creeping anxiety of something she couldn't quite explain. But soon, she wouldn't just feel it, she would know. And when the time came, when Carly was weak, vulnerable, and too exhausted to fight back, Charlotte would make sure she never escaped again. Carly quickly sensed that something was terribly wrong. She had narrowly escaped death once, thanks to Brennan's intervention, but the danger hadn't passed, it had only evolved into something far more insidious. At first, the signs were subtle, easy to dismiss as coincidences. A flickering light in her house, a misplaced object, the strange sensation of being watched even when she was alone. But as the days passed, the incidents became more direct, more deliberate, stripping away any illusion of security she had left. Her restaurant's security system was the first to be breached. One morning, she arrived at work to find that all the cameras had been disabled overnight. The footage had been wiped clean, leaving no trace of what, or who, had caused the malfunction. The thought of it sent a chill through her. Someone had wanted to move unnoticed, to prove that they could get past any barrier she put up. The violation of her space was unsettling enough, but it was only the beginning. Then, the brakes on her car failed. She was driving down the highway when she pressed the pedal, only to feel nothing beneath her foot. Panic surged through her as the vehicle hurtled forward, out of control. It took all her strength and skill to wrestle it onto the shoulder, yanking the emergency brake just in time to avoid catastrophe. She sat there, heart pounding, hands shaking as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. There was no doubt in her mind, it wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with her car, someone wanted her dead. Brennan. It had to be him. Who else would go to such extremes? Who else had the means and the motive? He had already tried to kill her once, maybe he had changed his mind about letting her live. Maybe this was his way of reminding her that she would never be free of his reach. Carly convinced herself that it was Brennan pulling the strings, tightening his grip around her throat, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But she was wrong. The real predator moved in silence, hidden beneath layers of deception. Charlotte was patient, methodical, unrelenting. She was the shadow that lingered just beyond Carly's vision, the whisper of danger she could never quite catch. While Carly obsessed over Brennan, Charlotte was already one step ahead, watching her every move, pushing her closer to the edge. Carly didn't know it yet, but she wasn't just being hunted. She was being toyed with, manipulated into a false sense of understanding. And by the time she realized the truth, that her greatest enemy wasn't Brennan but someone far more personal, it might already be too late. Meanwhile, Valentin remained completely unaware of his daughter's deadly intentions. He was too preoccupied with his own survival, fleeing from Brennan's relentless pursuit. The walls were closing in on him, and no matter how far he ran, the weight of his failure followed like a specter whispering in his ear. He had underestimated Brennan's wrath, and now, he was paying the price. Every step he took, every desperate attempt to find a safe haven, felt futile. Brennan was too powerful, too well-connected. Valentin knew that his escape was only an illusion. But what he didn't know was that Brennan wasn't merely chasing him, he was hurting him. This wasn't a game of pursuit, it was a carefully orchestrated hunt. Brennan had no intention of letting Valentin slip away into the shadows. He had already mapped out every possible route Valentin would take, anticipating his every move before he even made it. Valentin thought he was choosing his own path, but in reality, he was being guided straight toward a deadly trap. Brennan's reach extended far beyond what Valentin had expected. Every ally Valentin thought he could trust had been compromised, every safe house he considered had already been exposed. He was running in circles, playing right into Brennan's hands. The city that once offered him countless places to disappear had turned into a labyrinth, each path leading him closer to his doom. And at the center of it all, Brennan waited with cold, ruthless patience. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Valentin, blinded by desperation, had no idea that with each step, he was inching closer to his own execution. Brennan didn't need to chase him down, he simply needed to let Valentin believe he still had options until there were none left. When the time came, the trap would spring shut, and there would be no escape. The deadly game between Valentin and Brennan was far from over, but an even more dangerous force had now emerged from the shadows, Charlotte. While Valentin was consumed with his own survival, desperately seeking a way to outmaneuver Brennan, he remained blind to the storm brewing right in front of him. His daughter, shaped by years of loss, betrayal, and unwavering loyalty, had evolved into something far more dangerous than even he could have imagined. Charlotte was no longer just a girl seeking to prove herself, she was a predator, one who had learned from the best. Valentin had spent his life maneuvering through the world of deception and violence, but in doing so, he had unknowingly passed down a legacy of ruthlessness that Charlotte had embraced without hesitation. The difference between them was clear. Valentin, despite his lethal instincts, still operated with a sense of restraint. Charlotte did not. She was young, methodical, and unburdened by the weight of conscience. There were no second chances, no mercy. She had already crossed the line from innocence to something much darker, and she had no intention of looking back. Carly had faced many threats before. She had survived attempts on her life, outplayed enemies who wanted to see her fall, and endured betrayals that would have broken weaker women. But this was different. Charlotte was not just another rival, another vengeful adversary looking for a moment of retribution. She was something far worse, someone who had studied her, infiltrated her life, and learned exactly how to dismantle her piece by piece. The attacks had begun subtly, almost imperceptibly. The restaurant's security system had been breached, but there was no sign of forced entry, no clear indication of who had done it. The police found no evidence, no leads. Then, the brakes on Carly's car had failed, a near-fatal accident that she barely escaped. Again, there was no proof of sabotage, only the sickening realization that someone had planned it that way. Someone who wanted her to suffer, who wanted her to know she was being hunted but not by whom. And then there was the feeling, the unshakable sense that she was being watched. Carly was no fool. She had immediately assumed Brennan was behind it all, that this was his way of reminding her that she was still in danger, that her survival had only been a temporary reprieve. It made sense. He had the resources, the motive, the cold efficiency to make her life a living nightmare. And so she focused on him, believing that he was the enemy lurking in the darkness, tightening his grip around her throat. But she was wrong. Charlotte had been operating right under her nose, orchestrating every calculated move with the kind of patience and precision that even Valentin would have admired. She didn't need to strike immediately. Fear was a far more effective weapon than brute force. Carly was already exhausted, losing sleep, second-guessing herself at every turn. That was exactly what Charlotte wanted. She was breaking her down, weakening her defenses, making sure that when the final blow came, Carly wouldn't have the strength to fight back. Meanwhile, Valentin was running for his life, completely oblivious to the fact that his own daughter was on the warpath. Brennan was relentless, his hunt for Valentin fueled by an unforgiving rage. He had been humiliated, his power challenged in the most unforgivable way, and he would not rest until Valentin paid for it. But Brennan was not just seeking revenge, he was toying with his prey, forcing Valentin into a corner where there would be no escape. What Valentin didn't realize was that Brennan had anticipated his every move. The safe houses he thought he could rely on. Compromised. The allies he believed would protect him. Either dead or too afraid to cross Brennan. Valentin was running in circles, unknowingly walking straight into the trap that had been set for him. Every time he thought he had found a place to hide, Brennan was already there, waiting, watching, closing in. But the real danger wasn't just the trap that Brennan had laid, it was the one Valentin didn't even see coming. Charlotte. She was moving independently, operating outside of the war between her father and Brennan. And that made her the biggest threat of all. The question was no longer whether Valentin could survive Brennan's wrath. It was whether anyone could stop Charlotte before she went too far. Before she delivered the killing blow to Carly. Before she became something even Valentin wouldn't be able to control. Would Carly realize the truth before it was too late? Would Valentin uncover his daughter's deadly intentions in time to stop her? Or would the bloodshed continue, spiraling into something far more catastrophic than any of them could have predicted? One thing was certain, this was no longer just a game of survival. This was a reckoning, and no one was safe.